Assimilating into Your Own World, a mini documentary by Morgan Larson discussing the assimilation of Native Americans into the newfound culture. The assimilation of Native Americans into the new American society has taken over 300 years. Previously, contact with these people had not been necessary because the Europeans were just reaching the United States. It eventually became an important opportunity for trade in order to survive for both peoples. This encroachment on these lands created many wars and many lives lost. In the late 1860s, President Ulysses S. Grant suggested a peace treaty and moving Native Americans to specific sets of land in order to create peace. These land placements were often undesirable for Native Americans. By 1879, most of the people finally decided that Native Americans were being treated unfair, and this is the time that assimilation of Native American culture began. The idea of assimilation was short-lived because by 1882, the U.S. Indian Office issued rules governing the Court of Indian Offenses, which made traditional dances criminal offenses. It was said in 1923 that these practices prevented Native Americans from their crops, stocks, and families, and/or that inspired immoral and retrograde behavior. This initial idea of assimilation was an assimilation of Native Americans into the Euro-American society versus allowing Native Americans to practice among these people. The injustice continued as Native people who had been granted citizenship under the Dawes Act were told that their rights could be stripped. This Dawes Act initially sought to convert shared Indian tribal land into individual properties. Many people defied these commands to assimilate. They did this in many ways, including open defiance to bans and modifications of ceremonies to continue doing them. Oftentimes, Native Americans would petition the congressional representatives in order to gain back their certain rights. This is an example of how the Native Americans tried to use the U.S. citizenry infrastructure to protect their cultural freedoms. Eventually, the United States decided to continue pushing for assimilation. American boarding schools had a serious negative impact on two of the most important aspects of American Indian cultures, language and spirituality. Non-American students were forced to leave their culture at home and had to learn the customs of the American beliefs. Some students were even prisoners who were offered incarceration or to attend boarding schools, either the Hampton Normal School or the Carlisle Indian School. As Captain Richard Henry Pratt, famed founder of the Carlisle Indian School, wrote, "I believe in immersing the Indians in our civilization, and when we get them under, holding them there until they are thoroughly soaked." Captain Pratt did not fully understand the conditions of him drowning their students in his ideas would have. The growth of students in tribal schools on Indian reservations is growing steadily, even though most students in 1998 still remained in non-Indian cultural public schools and taught by non-Indian teachers. This growth of tribal schools shows that students are starting to assimilate not only back into their own culture, but still students are remaining in non-Indian controlled schools and still being assimilated into the American culture with less war. Historically, the assimilation of the Native American culture is one of the most difficult to understand. Native Americans are usually looked at as a complete and separate nation located within the United States. It was once said, "It's hard to be an Indian," by Asa Premale, a Yankton, Dakota holy man. The initial idea behind the Dawes Act to Native Americans was that the government felt that Indian ways of life were neither legitimate or valuable, and further assumed Indians were not entitled to self-determination. These ideas meant that we provide young Native Americans self-doubt, not only in themselves and their families, but in their whole entire culture as a whole. This self-doubt leads to other forms of doubts and troubles, including the educational struggles Native American students go through. The achievement of these students lags far behind their potential because of a cycle of doubt created from the many years of educational struggles from their family before them. Only 52% of Native American students finish high school, only 17% attend college, and only 4% graduate from college, and only 2% attend graduate schools. The dropout rates in some districts are approaching nearly 100%. This chart shows a small amount of students who attend exclusive tribal schools in their areas. The decision whether to mainstream and assimilate into dominant culture or to maintain tribal cultures must be a decision made early. Most of these students are still choosing mainstream culture. Historically, we are still pushing students to adopt our ideas more than adapting to and understanding their ideas. This is making life for these young students difficult, including low motivation, low attendance, and little engagement in the classroom. This makes the cycle continue among the tribal culture. The last idea I leave with is an article I read, which was written by a man who was one of the few Native Americans to make it all the way through to graduate school. He went through 6 schools before graduating, 2 of which are tribal colleges. He discussed his struggles going through college. His first idea was being put on the spot every day whenever anything Indian or Native came up in the classroom conversation. We picked these students immediately out to share their ideas because they are one. His final thought was how students often ask him how he got off the reservation, as if no one can get off the reservation. He says, "The reservation is a place that needs to be escaped from, like a black hole, lest all help and potential be sucked away." This stuck to me. This man believes that his reservation he comes from is a black hole. His home is a black hole that no one can get out of. It made me realize how important it is that as future teachers, we need to help these students not to get out, but to encourage their potential before it is too late.